Chris, the White House describes this fight over funding the Department of Homeland Security as one between Republicans. What's your take on that?
Well, it certainly seems to be between the Senate and the House on the Republican side. Democrats haven't made it easy for them because they've been blocking the bill that the House passed. But basically what you've got here is House Republicans, somewhat more conservative, certainly a wing that is driving this train. They say they will only fund long-term the Department of Homeland Security if it is linked to a rollback of the president's executive action protecting millions of people from deportation. Senate Republicans agree with that in principle, but say, look, we just don't have the votes. They've tried 4 times to break the filibuster by the Democrats in the Senate. They haven't been able to, and they finally say, you know what, enough, and they're going to vote and have voted to fund the Department of Homeland Security all the way through the end of September. So you've got this fight really between the House, which is sticking more to the principle, we don't like what the president is doing on immigration, we want to link that to funding DHS, and the Senate Republicans saying that's all well and good, but if you don't have the votes, at some point you got to give up.
So they're talking about perhaps a temporary bill, 3 weeks or so, to fund the Department of Homeland Security. What's going to change in 3 weeks, if anything?
Nothing, which is why it's a dumb idea. The only answer is that nobody wants to be blamed for closing the Department of Homeland Security. In fact, it wouldn't really close the department because about 85% of its 230,000 employees are considered essential. People of the TSA, people of the Border Patrol, they would continue to have to work. They wouldn't get paid. Only about 30,000 would be furloughed. But at a time when you've got all these threats of terror from ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab at the Mall of America, you don't want to be seen as even in any way, shape, or form closing DHS. But you're exactly right. You know, 3 weeks from now, there are going to be some conservative Republicans who are still going to be insisting that they use DHS funding as a lever to try to stop the president's executive action on immigration. And the fact is they don't have the votes either to get it through the Senate, or even if they could by some miracle, the president would veto it anyway. So I don't understand the point. Seems to me you might as well just take the medicine and agree to do it. But here's the problem. There are some Republicans who are, particularly in the House, who are so outraged at the idea that they can't find a way to roll back the president's executive action that they might take it out on John Boehner. There's some people saying he might lose his speakership if he just passed a clean bill to fund DHS through the end of September.
He's under a lot of pressure. Let's talk about presidential politics. Jeb Bush heard some boos at the Conservative Political Action Committee, CPAC, talking about immigration. Where does he stand with conservatives in your mind?
Well, look, he certainly, you know, this is another question of political reality and principle. There are a lot of Republicans who are very opposed to immigration reform, opposed to any sort of path to citizenship, even if it takes more than a decade. On the other hand, there are some more centrist, more moderate Republicans who say, look what Mitt Romney did. He took a hard line on immigration in 2012, and he ended up losing the Hispanic vote by 44 points to Barack Obama. You're talking about the fastest growing voting bloc in America. You've got to find a way to reach out to him. Do I think that Jeb Bush is exactly where the conservative heart of this party stands? No. On the other hand, he might be the most electable candidate.
I know you have an exclusive this weekend with Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. He's doing very well in the polls in Iowa, isn't he?
He is doing very well in the polls everywhere. He is the hot property in the Republican Party right now. He made a speech in Iowa at one of these candidate cattle calls a few weeks ago. And, you know, the fact that he stood up to the public worker unions in Wisconsin, not only stood up to them, but beat them, and then had to face a recall election and won that. He's able to say that not only do I have conservative principles, but I stand for them and I win with them. And that is very attractive to a lot of conservatives who look at McCain or look at Romney and say, you know, we have nominated moderates over the last couple of election cycles who we didn't really love. They didn't win anyway. Let's go with somebody who's somewhat more conservative. And let's face it, who also is very successful. He's won 3 elections in the very purple state of Wisconsin.
Finally, Chris, almost all of us use the internet, and the FCC vote on net neutrality is being described by some as a government takeover. Is that extreme or not?
Well, it certainly is not a government takeover. It's government regulation. And, you know, I don't really know how I feel about this. It's complicated. On the one hand, like a lot of people, anytime Washington gets involved, anytime the government gets involved, you worry about what's going to happen. On the other hand, the Internet today is not what it was 10 years ago, let alone 20 or whatever years ago. And so the idea that there may have to be some rules of the road, and what they're talking about particularly is that the Internet service providers can't pick and choose and give fast lanes for broadband service to companies that pay more and slower lanes to people who pay less. You know, maybe you need some equity, but I got to say, I, like a lot of other people, there was something very attractive about the unregulation, the wild, wild west quality of the Internet. Whether you could continue to have that forever is a good question.
What else do you have coming up on the program this weekend, Chris?
Well, yes, an exclusive interview with Scott Walker, who I think you have to say at this particular moment is the front runner for the Republican presidential nomination. We're also going to talk to Steve Scalise. He is the House Republican whip. He's the guy who counts the votes and will be able to tell us where they stand on funding for DHS. And when we go on the air Sunday, it's possible they still won't have funded it. And then a interesting power player of the week, I actually sing some opera with Renee Fleming, the country's leading opera star. I don't know if that'll get people to tune in or drive them away, but it is what it is, as they say.
We are forewarned. Chris, thanks very much. We'll look forward to it.
You bet. Thank you.